This is the brand new NVIDIA RTX 5090 Founders Edition, and there's been some controversy about this card, and I've experienced it because I did a little unboxing on YouTube. It was a short, and everybody in the comment section was like, Matt, fake frames, you know? All the improvements, all double the performance comes to DLSS4, which is just fake frames. And I get your concern, and we're gonna talk about fake frames later in the video, but there's still a lot of other things about this card where I feel like if you're in a professional niche, you're absolutely gonna go run out and buy this, even though it's $2,000. For gamers, they're probably looking at the 5080, the 5070 Ti. Those are significantly less. It'll still give you good performance and you're not gonna kill your budget. Now they have improved this. They bumped up the VRAM to 32 gigabytes. It's now DDR7, so it's a little bit faster. The bandwidth is also bigger, 1792 gigabytes a second, up from 10,008. You have two decoders now instead of just one, and this does make a difference in terms of video performance, which I'll talk about later. And from the design, this is just such a good looking card. I mean, like, look how amazing this looks. It looks stealthy. It's the same length as the previous 4090 Founders Edition, but it's not as thick. It's almost like half the size. If you're building a small form factor PC, this is probably the card for you. Now you do have a bunch of ports on the back. You have 3 display ports. These are 2.1B, so they're gonna support really high refresh rate displays, and your HDMI port. Like, this is a true 2-slot card. Now it does cost $2,000, it is expensive, and you are going to need a slightly more powerful PSU. With the 4090, it topped out at 450 watts. This one tops out at 575. So you will need a minimum of a 1000 watt PSU. Now I want to start with productivity, and there's 2 specific areas where NVIDIA GPUs just clearly crushes the competition. One is 3D work. Like, if you're a 3D artist, 3D designer, you're rendering 3D, period, you want an NVIDIA GPU. The CUDA cores are just big in this industry, and you need an NVIDIA GPU in order to do this the fastest. So for example, in Blender Benchmark, I scored 7414 in Monster, which was a 30% performance improvement over the 4090 and a 99% improvement over the MacBook Pro 16 M4 Max, and even more than the M2 Ultra. If you're a developer and you're working with AI, specifically large language models, an NVIDIA GPU is still superior compared to most other products on the market. The transfers or tokens per second using this NVIDIA GPU is faster than the 4090. The fact that this has more VRAM means you can load larger language models in memory and work with them compared to before. Now, when it comes to video development, this is really fast, but in Adobe Premiere Pro, if you're looking at the total picture, I only saw about a 7% performance improvement over the 4090, and this generally comes down to like working in the timeline and rendering. But in DaVinci Resolve, things were very, very different. Like, not only did I feel on the timeline a smoother experience, but when it comes to GPU-based effects, the 5090 is awesome. Like, I was comparing one video I was working on that had GPU-based effects under the pictures that I put on the timeline. My MacBook Pro M2 Ultra would slow down a little bit when I scrubbed over it. It wasn't terrible or anything, but I could notice it. With the 5090, completely smooth, okay? The other area improvement was render times. Generally, the MacBook has always been the fastest to render my video compositions, but this does it the fastest now. As for Photoshop, the MacBook Pro 16 with M4 Max came out on top with a 25% performance improvement. Now, before I show you rasterized gaming performance, let's talk about 3D Mark Time Spy. This is a dirty way of just seeing the performance difference between generations. So 5090 scored a 38538, which is a 18% performance improvement over the 4090. Doesn't sound that great, but as soon as you test 3D Mark Steel Nomad, which actually runs at 4K, it scored 13585, which was a 38% performance improvement. Now, the first game I tested was Shadow of the Tomb Raider. That scored 230 FPS. That's a 50 FPS increase compared to the 4090, which is about 23%. In Black Myth Wukong, which doesn't have a true way to turn off upscaling, but you can set it to DLAA, that scored 49 FPS, which is a 12 FPS increase over the 4090, so about 27%. In F122, it scored 281 FPS. That's an 88 FPS increase compared to the 4090, which is around 36%. 28%. In Dirt 5, it scored 223 frames per second, up from 194. We saw about a 14% performance improvement. But in Cyberpunk, I saw the biggest difference. With RTX off, settings set to Ultra, I saw 111 frames per second, up from 74, which is a 40% improvement. In Avatar, Frontier of Pandora, it was a 16% improvement. But if you average out all the games together, the average comes to about 28%. So I'm seeing a 28% in rasterized performance compared to the 4090. Now, 28% is not massive, but it's still significant, right? It just, again, it depends on the game you're playing. And for a lot of people, they're going to turn things on like DLSS Super Resolution. Now, DLSS Super Resolution is not as bad as FrameGen in terms of latency. It makes the game look really good without introducing too much latency. And if your card supports it and the game supports it, you should definitely turn it on if you want a higher FPS. So for example, Shadow of the Tomb Raider again with no FrameGen, we're talking about 260 frames versus 242. So only a 7% increase, but still notable. In Wukong, we saw 105 versus 85 on the 4090. So a 21% increase in performance. F122 scored about 295, so that's what, 11 frames with DLSS off versus 194, which equates to a 41% performance improvement. Again, Cyberpunk 2077 saw a big increase, 184 frames per second with DLSS Super Resolution on versus 108. That's a 52% performance increase. Now let's talk about FrameGen. This is gonna get a little spicy because look, I paid $2,000. I don't wanna enable FrameGen on a 5090. It should run every game perfectly. And this thing actually can at 4K with no problems. In fact, my old 4090 was more than capable for the games that I was playing. But there's gonna be a time, maybe 3 or 4 years down the road, where this card is not able to play some of the newer titles that come out just as fast. And that might be a situation where I need FrameGen. So now we have multi-frame gen with this new RTX 5090. With DLSS 4, you can multiply it all the way up to 8 times. Now, for example, in Cyberpunk 2077, if you leave 2 times on, I was getting 350 frames per second. If you put up to 4 times, that goes all the way up to 570 frames per second. And what that means is at 4 times is for every frame, 3 extra frames are generated. Now, having high FPS is great, but it does reduce the fidelity of the game. I did see some shimmering here and there. It was a little bit of artifacts, but it still looked good, you know? Yes, there's gonna be latency introduced, but has been reduced compared to the previous generation. So with the 4090, latency used to be around 50 milliseconds. It's been chopped down to about 30 to 32 milliseconds. So for a game like Cyberpunk, FrameGen's okay, right? But when it comes to first-person shooters, competitive esports scene, you're not gonna use FrameGen. Like, you're not even turning it on. But the one game-changing technology that comes with this card is DLSS Override. This is huge because you can override the older version of DLSS, introduce better models in order to provide better images and also better FPS in the games you're playing. You can even introduce multi-frame generation in some of the games you're playing. Like, I tested it out with Marvel Rivals and I got some insane FPS playing with it. And look, again, I'm not saying you should enable this for Marvel Rivals, which is more of a first-person shooter, but the fact that you have this option for these types of games is pretty amazing. So here's the truth. I have a 4090. I truly don't need to upgrade. I am happy with it, and I'm still happy with it today. So if the 4090 or whatever GPU you're using right now runs the games well that you're playing, don't even think about it. But I feel like most people buying a 5090 are probably gonna be professionals. Like, this is really geared towards the professional user who's making 3D objects and rendering them. Someone who wants to play with large language models, they're gonna be looking at this card. But in terms of frame generation, look, you can hate it all you want, okay? But I would rather have it than not have it. Plus all these other technologies that they're introducing just gives you more knobs to play with to get the best settings from the games that are available today. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.